It's time now to welcome on stage for Green Power Panel 3 to discuss the role of the government, auto components, auto OEMs, and academia synergy to manage the transition from ICE to hybrid and electric vehicles. I call upon Mr. Dilip Chenoy. Mr. Chenoy was former DG of the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, SIAM. Till recently, Managing Director and CEO of the National Skill Development Corporation, NSDC, Mr. Chenoy is on the Board of Governors at IILM, New Delhi. So why don't you join us on stage, please? Yes. The Board of Studies, All India Management Association, and Chairman of Sant Longowal Institute of Engineering and Technology. He was also Deputy Director General in the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII. He was responsible for industry sectors and Association Council, ASCON, and a member of the CII Harvard Business School project that worked on the competitiveness of Indian industry. A round of applause for Mr. Chenoy. Please also welcome Mr. Sunil Chaturvedi. Mr. Chaturvedi is a graduate from IIT Delhi, is CEO of ASDC, and also Chairman, QRC, the Qualifications Registration Committee of NSDC. With 37 years of experience across automotive, energy, environmental and management consulting, M&A domains, his span of work has covered varied functional verticals like engineering and QA, manufacturing, project management, business development, and C-level P&L responsibilities. People development has been a passion towards which he planned and organized delivery of multiple training modules in domains like productivity and BPR. Please do welcome him, ladies and gentlemen, with loud applause. May I also call upon Mr. Karthick Atmanathan. Welcome, sir. Mr. Atmanathan, a technocrat from IIT Madras, has a rich multi-domain experience of nearly 30 years. Earlier in his career, Mr. Karthick has been a successful entrepreneur with ventures like Iris Manufacturing and Vaidya Tool Room. More recently, he has been working with the Ashok Leyland Group for the last 10 years, overseeing key product development and engineering functions. Credited for groundbreaking projects like the Captain Cab and the Sunshine School Bus, Mr. Karthick has recently assumed charge as head of the group's EV and eMobility business. Please do welcome him, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Rajesh Mukhija. Welcome, sir. Mr. Mukhija is currently heading after sales and CRM functions at Hero Moto Corp. An industry veteran with over 34 years of experience in the two-wheeler industry, Mr. Mukhija is a BTech from the Birla Institute of Technology, Mesra. Though he started his career with Escorts Limited, he joined the Hero Group way back in 1985, and under his leadership, took on several customer-centric initiatives like the 5-year warranty, the Hero Good Life program, the largest CRM program with 10 million customers, service digitization, and the Technicians Relationship Program, which is the Hero IGNU initiative. He is a self-confessed nature freak, fond of trekking and fond of traveling, and he loves trekking. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. And last but not least, I would like to call upon Mr. Sukanta Day. Sir, Mr. Day will also be moderator. Mr. Day is an MBA in Marketing and Finance from Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and an engineering graduate from IIT Kharagpur. He is Associate Editor, Business India. He has been National Product Manager at Unilever, PepsiCo South Asia, and AT&T Wireless India. He was Chief Marketing and Commercial Officer, Idea Cellular Limited, and President, Emerging Business, Tata Docomo. At PepsiCo, he was awarded the Global Leadership Award by the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, in 1998. He was also named one of the top 50 marketing professionals in the country in November 2004. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and give a loud round of applause to our Green Panel 3. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I got an awesome task because I'm not from the industry, as you know. I come from the FMCG industry, and I have all these stalwarts from the industry with more than 2 centuries of experience. But I'd like to set the ball rolling with a little bit of history, because it's after lunch, so we got to loosen up a bit. The electric vehicle was actually invented before the ICE. It was way back in 1839 that a Scottish inventor, Robert Anderson, made the first crude electric carriage. So it outdates the ICE. And then, of course, it is well known that the Belgium engineer in 1858, Joseph Lenoir, actually made the ICE. And it was none other than Ford with the steam model way back in October 1st of 1908. They started the first car to roll out in Detroit. And today in Delhi, we are wishing there were less cars. So the world can be divided into 2 eras, in my opinion. The pre-fossil era, which was before 1880 actually to be specific, when coal was used to generate electricity. So before that, it was the pre-fossil era. And today, of course, we are in the fossil era, and we wish to go back to the pre-fossil era. That means we want to get away from all fossil fuel, make sure our planet is as green as possible, and that is why it's called the Green Panel 3. So it's a full cycle we want to do. If you see 1900 in the US, in the 3 cities of New York, Boston, and Chicago, there were about 5,000 odd cars running, and 28% of them were electric vehicles. In 1966, the US Congress did a Gallup poll in which 33 million Americans were interested in electric vehicles. So cut to modern times, enough of history, cut to modern times, we have this gentleman from Ashok, Leyland. He will tell you that he has already launched India's first mass electric vehicle. And Toyota, we don't have anybody from Toyota, maybe somebody from the audience. They, of course, have a hybrid car. So these are the 2 sort of emerging sort of products which are on the road you will see, which is going to hopefully drive us to the post-fossil era. So with that, I'd like to start my panel, and we'd like to have enough time for question and answer in interactive session. And I would like to start with Mr. Karthick, since he's the person in the panel who has actually worked on an electric vehicle and made it rolling on the ground. The taste of the pudding is in the eating. So I would like to ask him to start and give his comments on how to transition from the ICE to the electric vehicle age, that is from the fossil to the non-fossil. So.
Good afternoon. My experience is limited to commercial vehicles. In fact, when you say passenger, we talk about the passenger who's behind the driver. And it's relatively simpler than the challenges which are faced by the car guys and the two-wheeler guys in terms of market penetration and customer acceptance. The reason is the primary criteria is money there. It's everything else helps sales and helps your usage, but the primary criteria is always total cost of ownership, or if it's a government STU, then it is L1. So predominantly, we are challenged with a mindset of bureaucrats in STUs. because the political leadership keeps changing. So the bureaucrats first need to have a buy-in. That's the first interface for us. And in trucks, it's nothing but money. So if I take something to him which costs him less, he'll just buy it, even if it's made using donkey energy or monkey energy. As long as it's legal and it's making money for him, he'll take it. So it's a relatively simpler job in terms of market penetration. But in terms of product development, typically these vehicles see use for anywhere between 12 to 18 hours a day. So you don't see passenger vehicles being used to that extent. And there's a fair amount of abuse because the user, the owner cannot control use too much, unlike in passenger cars. So we have to necessarily compensate for the over exploitation, which our customers tend to do. So given these two challenges, we decided that we'll have a very open strategy in Ashok Leyland. We will not bet on a single energy strategy. So whether it's swap or fast charging or flash charging or range extenders, it's simply about money. So, and swapping from our side, I think we are the only OEM who are working with the prof on that and putting money and people on it. We believe that still you see evidence of failure. You do not have enough evidence to let go of it. It's the most competitive solution. So we have backed it, we are funding it, and we are putting resources behind it. We are hoping it will click because currently, given current battery costs and the overall economics, a swap strategy for buses is very competitive compared to the other strategies. So it doesn't mean that you have to go for it blindly, but you, like all product development activities, these have failure modes. And as engineers, we will be patient and we'll resolve them. If we can't resolve them, the product won't get launched. So it's quite straightforward in the commercial vehicle industry for us. I think there's a huge opportunity in terms of interaction with academia and research institutes and research companies which offer research on a service which don't exist in India, but it's very common in Europe. And it's also an opportunity for us to not just stay at par, but if both corporates and academia think well, we can stay ahead. So we don't need people feeling proud about having made the vehicle. We need people to feel proud about having worked on, let's say, a material system, rather than a material engineering job. You know, you must have seen that Batman glove straightening up when you put in electricity. That's a material system. So there are quite a few frontiers which are not done very well abroad, and they don't have the scale that we have. So honestly, we have the opportunity, and we guys are funding quite a few weird ideas. Hopefully some of them will bring back money. And we are looking forward. It's been nice to work with IIT Madras on the battery side so far. We are hoping to develop other relationship with central and central institutes as well as academic institutions. And we see good talent, so I'm sure we'll do something nice.
Thank you very much, sir. To put you a little bit perspective, I think he touched on a very important thing going forward, that any development of a new technology will always have to take into account the cost. So I have some statistics which may be of interest to you. The total cost of ownership, which is for, say, 215 compact passenger vehicle, electric vehicle versus the ICE, the 44% cost advantage is to an ICE vehicle. So they are working against huge odds. And if you take a mid-size passenger vehicle, of course he's working on much larger vehicles, then the cost advantage in the favor of ICE is about 60% as of today. And the biggest challenge, all of them will tell you, is that the weight of the battery is the biggest challenge in an electric vehicle car. If you take the other end of the spectrum, that how much of greenhouse gas emissions you actually save, then the typical electric vehicle will be 23% more advantageous than an ICE, because that's the amount of greenhouse gas emissions which you will be able to control. So I'd like to now request Mr. Dilip Chenoy, he's a well-known figure in the industry, to please let us have his comments on how to shift from the ICE, the large industry which it is today, to the new startup industry of electric vehicles.
Thank you. So first, it's very interesting when everybody is being introduced. So you have IIT Chennai, you have IIT Delhi, IIT Kharagpur, and BITS Mesra. So I'm the only non-engineer in the panel. So I thought, so we're talking about a transition, and right through the morning, in sitting and listening, and the biggest barrier to, let's say, populating electric vehicles, everybody's been talking about charging points, right? So I go back to the telecom industry where the Moderator has significant experience. So when you go back to early 1900s, telecom penetration rural was 0.4, urban was slightly higher, and the big challenge was there was not enough landlines, and we had to penetrate landlines, right? So assume we are now, and these are the charging stations that we want. We actually made a swap and went to wireless and mobile. So are we asking the wrong questions and therefore hunting for answers going forward? I was also interested to hear about the regulation and policy. You want to promote battery swapping, which eventually will be the solution. You got to act now. Because if all the OEs develop their own vehicles, right, and with their own charging plugs, you will have charging stations like your mobile recharging stations at airports where you will be hunting. You will have the thing, but you won't have a plug, right? So you have a whole adapter industry. So the automobile regulation traditionally has always played catch-up. There is a World Forum for Harmonization of Regulation in Geneva, which is playing catch-up. The electric vehicle industry can actually stand on its head and say, okay, can we have the regulation first, and can we have everything else driving it? That's the first point. So is the role of government to promote usage, or to create a regulatory framework that provides harmonization and move to a particular direction? Second point, the point of this panel discussion, transition. In the automotive industry, everything that has been discussed today, we actually have a live example of transition and a failure of that transition. And that is the introduction of CNG in the country. Okay? It's a very good precursor. Today, you see lines outside CNG stations. You will see 10 times the lines outside charging stations, no matter what you do, right? You will see, a move towards converting old vehicles into CNG vehicles. There'll be regulatory issues. There will be all sorts of other issues, safety issues. So what can we learn from the CNG experience to actually address that? Very interesting. A lot of you may not know it. But today, wherever we have CNG, hydrogen is definitely cleaner than EV, right? There's no two doubts other than engineers in the panel. You can actually have a 10% or an 8% hydrogen fleet in Delhi by just blending hydrogen with CNG. And there has been research done, all existing vehicles, studies done, that using the existing vehicles by introducing this, you can make it clean fuel. So the transition is interesting. So you sell new electric vehicles, okay? Are you going to say that all public transportation, all taxis have to be CNG, right? Then you'll have a disruptor like Ola coming in or Uber coming in and incorporating petrol and diesel taxis into the framework, and the regulators will always be doing catch up. So how do you actually, again, it comes to regulation. You mandate it, it's not going to work, right? You say, okay, in this area, only electric vehicles can fly, which has been done elsewhere. The challenge is people. You see, we talk about number of vehicles in Delhi. If you go to areas of Delhi, those of you not gone, go to Sadar Bazaar, go to Chandni Chowk, go to Khari Bauli, there are no vehicle traffic jams. There are human jams. If a guy carrying a cylinder is walking in that alley, you can't move, right? To put it in perspective, the population of National Capital Territory is 26 million. The population of Australia is 24 million. Compare that landmass with our landmass. So there's a different kind of a challenge. So the whole thing has to be seen in the mobility framework. And how do you transit this? It means some uncomfortable decisions. How do you reduce the number of trips in a city? So we are into this GARP model in Delhi, right? So you want to have odd even, you want to reduce, you want to have dust. But it's not going to happen because people have to travel. People stay in Delhi, come to Gurgaon. People stay in Gurgaon, come to Delhi. Unless you address the trips, whether electric vehicles or no, it's not going to work. You have 75 million two-wheelers on the road today. So tomorrow we say, okay, 2030, I bought a vehicle today, 2017. It's a 15-year period. I'm allowed to have it on the road. Yeah? It's only Hero two-wheeler, 75 million, okay? So you say, okay, now only electric two-wheelers. I bought a vehicle, right? Are you going to ban it? Are you going to say retrofit the entire IC engine into this thing? Nobody is actually working on that at the moment. So, one, regulation. Two, what is the end point and how do you actually want to go to that? How do you deal with the existing park, right? The third thing is that everybody is looking at battery as a solution. Are there other alternate energy storage or energy ways we can handle that to power mobility that we've not thought today, which do not add weight to the vehicle, right? There are a lot of things happening in the power industry and let's say in the mobile industry and in the transportation industry. So I think these are fundamentally the three challenges that I see going forward in terms of how do you manage the transition, and everything is related to regulation. So if you get a Supreme Court to ban all fossil fuel vehicles in Delhi and say only public transportation and taxis will be allowed by electric vehicles, which they did for CNG, right? Then you have one scenario. How do you convert CNG vehicles? What do you do with those CNG vehicles? Because CNG is not available in other parts of the country. At least petrol and diesel could be more and sold somewhere. So you have a regulatory challenge on one hand. You have a technology challenge on the second hand. And then you have a transition challenge on the third hand. And unless we find a collective solution to this, we won't come into it. And one final point, if I may, since I chair an engineering institution, a government-run engineering institution, the funding of R&D to the engineering sector in India or in the university sector is next to zero. Majority of the government R&D funding goes to the government institutions. Most of the auto OEMs actually work with only the IITs or the Indian Institute of Science. A lot of foreign OEMs are actually blocking up research capability in the IITs and the IASC and the other leadership. So there's a big challenge of how industry utilizes the academic network to get into this framework. But there's one very small thing happening, and it's happening through SAE. I don't know if a lot of you know that SAE has this FE cycle competition and this E competition where student clubs are actually building efficient and electric vehicles and competing. If we can promote that, the problem with the kids, at least in my institution in Sangrur, is we don't get industry sponsors. With me being chairman and me talking to automotive, no, why should we do that? And unless industry comes forward and puts money there on enabling the student community and the teacher community to do research in the areas that they want to do, it's not going to work. And just for information, the first four-door, Mahindra E2 is a two-door vehicle. Right? The first four-door electric vehicle manufactured by Indian OE was launched in the 2008 SIAM annual convention. But that's not seen the light of day, but another version will actually see the light of day here. So if you're looking at giving a person a two-door vehicle versus a four-door vehicle plus boot space, right? So there are other kind of consumer or customer preferences, what they want in a vehicle, they will not actually adopt faster.
Thank you very much. Now, in the customer lifecycle management of a vehicle, it's well known that you may spend 2 months thinking about which new vehicle to buy. You may actually spend 15 days going around finalizing the vehicle. But after that, when you have purchased the vehicle, you are with it for 5 years or 10 years. So after sales is the largest component of the customer lifecycle management of any vehicle. And who better than Mr. Rajesh Mukhija, who now looks after nearly 7.5 million vehicles on the road, to shed some light on this and how it will transition and the challenges we'll face with the new electric vehicle era. I'm sorry, 75 million. I'm very sorry, my mistake.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Anuj and World Auto Forum for organizing such a discussion. It's really, really very, very important. We all are sitting together. I am not updated about this. Of course, I have experience of after-sales service. I have experience with Hero. With my experience, the way from an industry perspective, I am looking at all this is, this transition from IC engines to electric vehicles is a huge, and it has huge challenges. As Dilip ji said, that there is a challenge on regulation, there is a challenge on technology, and if I look from the market side or from a customer side, there is a challenge on customer acceptability, product performance, creating service infrastructure, dealers' business model, dealers finding a commercial value. See, the whole system, whole ecosystem is tuned around IC engines only. We are manufacturing IC engines, whole industry is into that. There has to be transition in manufacturing, clearly. The dealers are used to, customers are used to using IC engines only. If I look at two-wheelers, of course, there was few electric two-wheelers were launched. It started by Hero also. And some of these two-wheelers could not really become as large volume players on account of certain challenges and certain issues. Could be on account of regulation, could be on account of performances, could be on account of charging station, the life cycle, like how much once I charge the vehicle, how many kilometers I can drive it. So a lot of issues are there, but of course, the move is very good. We all need to prepare for it. Purely from a service point of view, purely from a market point of view, I think the few important things would be, one is technology, how good these products are. Ultimately, these need to be accepted by customers. Unless customer accepts it, how the whole thing will move. And once the customer accepts, of course, rest all is support. Creating charging infrastructure. So support from the government in terms of creating charging infrastructure. If those kind of regulations, policies are being clarified well in time, the industry can definitely prepare. That's not a major issue. Charging stations can be created. There can be joint charging stations supported by government, supported by industry. Manpower capability, the people who are going to look after these products, electric vehicles, their capability building, role of ASDC into that, role of individual manufacturers into that, in creating a network of people who can handle this product and who can handle these customers. So technology, manpower capability building, infrastructure at dealership, I think these are some of the challenges. And of course, the dealers also need to find a value, a commercial value into the whole thing. Dealers earning, today on IC engines, when the vehicles are coming, the number of component, spare parts sale of IC engine related components. So I think these are some of the areas. To my mind, all these issues are addressable and can be addressed. If initiated well in time, we should not land them into crisis. We have sufficient time. We have best of the capabilities, most experienced people in the industry to take care of these issues. So I am quite hopeful on this. This can be taken care of once we have some approach together by the industry, not as an individual player.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rajesh. So no industry can be built without having the appropriate skill structure built into it. As Mr. Rajesh himself alluded, manpower capability building is crucial, especially with new industries, new ecosystem, new players, new after-sales service, new infrastructure. So again, I would request Mr. Sunil Chaturvedi, who is the CEO of ASDC, and government already has the National Skill Development Corporation, which is a large organization, building capability and ensuring employment to everybody, particularly the youth. So may I request him to please shed some light on how the transition will take place and how the new skill will be developed and new capabilities for taking this industry further.
Thank you, Chairman. So actually, we start talking about EV and just focus on that, but we forget sometime that EV is actually an outcome of a larger issue and not necessarily a topic in itself. And the larger issue is actually the environmental situation, and again on two counts. One is pollution, and the second is the global warming. If you look at EV is only one of the solutions, and it is being talked about because as it happens, perhaps the governments particularly are able to lay their biggest bet on EV. But it may not be the only solution going forward. Imagine the transition that Dilip mentioned about, and so did Karthick and Rajesh, that the current capability of the fossil fuel based technology and its network in terms of design, development, manufacturing, selling, servicing, and the 45% cost advantage that the chairman mentioned, captured, tells me that despite the focus that the regulatory bodies, that means governments world over, are giving on EV because they know nothing best, I think the auto industry worldwide is quietly working on alternative models also. And if not, it will be my hope that they should work. Imagine that the combination of fuel becoming cleaner on the one hand, the combustion chamber becoming more efficient, second, and thirdly, the converters or the catalytic converters are able to capture the obnoxious things before they leave the environment. Suppose a combination of these three things are able to provide a solution which addresses the original issue of pollution, then perhaps EV focus might just shift, who knows. In the meantime, because EV has made so much of progress, I think it's only inevitable, and also because of the government push, and not just in India. World over you see the Tokyo Motor Show going on now or earlier, anywhere, and every country is talking about a time frame of putting all their fleets on the roads of their respective countries to be electric vehicles because they know nothing better as of today. But if tomorrow or day after, in maybe a couple of years' time or 5 years' time or even a decade for that matter, through a combination of research and development oriented programs, if something can be found out, as I said, combination of cleaner fuel, superior combustion in the chamber, and better catching capabilities at the converter level, then this 45% cost advantage, which is it's a starting advantage, will actually drive perhaps this current technology as a good challenger to any other alternative model. On the other hand, since governments are talking of electric mobility, so therefore it's very difficult to reason out with government, as we all find everywhere in the world. So therefore we also have to continue to work on bettering the current EV state of the art to newer heights, whether it's battery or it is the overall weight or whatever you have. But apart from the cost advantage which the current technology is enjoying over the electric mobility, the other thing I think to look at is that electric mobility on its own is actually not reducing the environmental issue. It's only shifting. Because if you still have to depend on fossil fuel or coal or others to produce electricity which will charge the electric vehicles, then you're only geographically shifting a problem from this place to another. So if you look at the ground level view, perhaps the urban areas, till the time something better happens, will keep pushing towards electric mobility. So while they become relatively cleaner in their environment, but the areas where the power plants are put to produce electricity, which will charge these vehicles, will continue to become darker, their environment. But if you, that's the ground level view, but if you go up somewhere in space, you'll see that there is no difference. I mean, you are still as much of a overall issue at the planet level as it has been today. So shifting from the pollution point of view, yes, I think there is no way but to keep working towards more efficient electric vehicles, because the urban municipalities all over the world will continue to push for this. Still, our industry shows that the existing fossil fuel based thing, as I mentioned earlier, is also capable of competing well. Now this is what brings us to the other issue which is related to this, as to who will drive these changes. Not just the transition in the field, whether it is what to do with the large population of vehicles on the road, how to convert them, and the infrastructure issue. Apart from all that, if you look at just these two things, R&D based improvement on the fossil fuel based technology, ICE technology, and also a parallel R&D program for superior electric mobility, I think it's a double-barreled opportunity in my view, where at least from the academia point of view, there is lots more that's possible to do. Now, there is lots that can be said in this, but I'm just sort of moving forward to how ASDC comes into picture. It amazes me that decade after decade after decade, and all of you I'm sure have experienced the same thing, in our country we keep talking about industry academia disconnect. I have been to so many, even within last year, such workshops, programs, how to connect industry to academia and the two. And I'm sure all of you and all of us here would have done so for several decades. So I really wonder as to why we don't tire repeating the same thing again and again and again and again. What at ASDC we are trying to do to address the system of this situation is that we are providing what we feel a solid bridge between industry and academia, which is to say that the undergraduate programs of the universities and colleges to have certification programs which are into R&D for automotive industry. We already have tie-ups with 6 different universities, 2 in Chennai, 3 in fact, MGR, Veltech, and also SRM. A couple of them in Jaipur, including Manipal, one in Gurgaon, which is BM Munjal University, one in Chandigarh, that is Chitkara, and my own ambition is to have at least 100 colleges across the country over the next few years who will have these programs offered. Of course, we are offering 5 different domains, that is R&D, manufacturing, sales, service. But here we are talking more about the R&D part. So I'll urge my co-panelists here who come from industry, one from two-wheeler and Ashok Leyland, and also I'm sure there are many who are in the audience here, to please come forward and support. And there are many details which could be discussed, but a key feature of these certification program would be at least one minor live project with industry. Now, when we say R&D, In our country, most unfortunately, we always think of only building a new car or new vehicle which looks very fancy. This SAE Baya thing that Dilip mentioned, which happens in Indore every year. You see everybody, 150 of those colleges, everybody producing same, which looks a very fancy car. Now that catches imagination, but it is really not solving any problem on the ground. When we say R&D, we are talking of smallest of component, a new material which can be developed, because ultimately it's the system integration which leads to any product development. So whether it is parts or aggregates or materials or even
transition from ICE to EV. I'd like to open the floor up now for any questions to the panel. Please go ahead and ask your question. Please just state your name and just ask the question. Don't give a viewpoint, We already have so many viewpoints from the panel. Yes, please. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
My question is for Mr. Karthick. Hi, sir. My name is I represent SIAM Consulting. We are a consulting firm focused on metals and mining. So I had two questions for you. One is, you mentioned you've come out with an electric bus. So I was wondering, what do you think is the savings in the total cost of ownership analysis over a lifetime? And second is, as an OEM, what are you doing about setting up a battery value chain and promoting indigenous battery manufacturing? Or what is your strategy for procuring batteries in the long term? Thank you.
I'm sorry, neither are going to get direct answers, but I'll at least explain. See, on total cost, the fundamental issue is there are two key criteria. The cost of batteries and the vehicle itself is steadily coming down. So you catch me 6 months later, I'll give you different figures. So this is something which we have to take cognizance of when we go out to the market and when we do the product. So that's one key consideration now, which will disappear in about 2-3 years. The other one is the number of kilometers the customer gets to use. So there are city buses which do only 80 kilometers. There are some which need do 250. And since running costs are lower, obviously you want to move to EV in those buses where you run more, so that you save with the same investment instead of just parking it outside your compound. So TCO is just a qualified reply. I'm not going to be able to give you figures right now. So, but all said and done, if your battery is at about, say, 200 at a pack level, and you have a delta cost of about, say, 25 lakhs between a conventional ICE bus and a EV bus, excluding batteries, right? I think you've got a case where the guy has a viability gap of just 20 lakhs over a 7-year period, which is not bad at all, which is pretty good. But all said and done today, when I said competitive solutions, I meant to achieve it even with government incentives. It needs to make money sense to the buyer. Now, how do we make it happen is the second challenge, but first we take cognizance. In terms of supply chain development, right now the skill and the base in India is quite poor. But ACMA has started now, and these guys, when they start, they won't stop. They will deliver, right? So it's only a matter of time. And for us, these guys have been with us for 30 years. They know how to handle cyclicality. They know how to handle our sourcing teams and our finance plant, etc. So these are the people you really want to bet with if they can. Technology is a small part of the detail. Honestly, it's a very rash statement to make, but it's something which money acquires or a partnership acquires. The importance is in doing a business relationship, understanding the cyclicality and working with the OEMs. So even though we've gone with people abroad, we have concrete commitments from them on at what volume level they will set up a local facility, and they will either set it up as subsidiaries or as partnerships. And we've already started introducing our suppliers to these people so that one or the other will click. Because we want to be with the same supplier base, not because of the technology, but because of the company and the people there. I hope that answered your...
Any other question? So since there are no other questions, I'd like to close the panel with... You have a question? Okay.
Yeah, buses right now we are doing a Tesla here. We are doing everything because there's no one else to do it. So we are funding and doing all sides, including charging infrastructure, chargers, swap stations, the works. Once it becomes an ecosystem, there will be others who will be willing to invest. But right now, somebody has to move. So, and at a steering committee and board level, we've decided that we will commit and we will enable the ecosystem. So we are committing significant resources, both money and people.
Yeah, Dilip has a point. Sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
You know, one of the drivers of the change is our high import bill of petroleum products, right? But if you look at what we'll import to create that EV system in terms of Cerano sheets, electrical steel sheets, cobalt, lithium, and who are the producers of that and where in the world they're available, which I don't think anybody has very closely looked at.
Correct.
There might be a rethink, and fairly quickly. Unless, of course, technology moves us away from that. And this is something which has not really come out into the open right now, but that's key to the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Last question. Go ahead, please.
I'd like to ask one thing. Say you are already doing a Tesla over here, as you said, you're developing the charging infrastructure, the battery swap, everything you are looking at. Yeah. It's of course R&D is going on. But say, for example, I have a deployed infrastructure to a certain extent to run my buses, to run my product. Now, after a few years, the government comes up with a policy where I have to stick to certain guidelines. So, how you are mitigating the risk that is involved in converting you are setting up certain infrastructure. There's a risk. How you're mitigating that?
See, I don't think regulation is too far behind in my assessment. Standardization was, but that started again. Like in swap, it's meaningless to start without agreeing on the terminal connectors and the battery sizes, including the direction of replacement, because in the bus depots otherwise, different depots will have to handle from different sides, or same depot, different buses they have to do from different sides. So in swap, we are not moving forward. We have a pretty good consortium with Tata Motors, Mahindra. That was the one which was falsely reported as we are investing together, but actually we are just sitting and working together at a technical level. We are not moving forward. There are still 3 points which are not agreed, so we are not committing those details. We have to do that standardization and agree so that we'll all be able to respect it. The complication comes if and when a government body comes and an individual in a government body takes a very strong stand against something which is already agreed and practiced. So that time we'll have to negotiate. But for other aspects like charging, there is a body in SIAM which is addressing it. Finally, the big daddy of standardization, BIS, has started the work now. They are there legally mandated to do the job. They should have been doing it 2 years ago. They have started now, so we immediately stop our activity, push it to them, and then engage with them proactively. Because if it comes from BIS, it comes to stay. So it's better done with them. But you don't wait. There's enough clarity and push at a political leadership. I think administrative leadership is a little weak or a little slower. So we need to respond from industry now. So at least that's our outlook.
Okay, so that brings us to the close of this session. I just want to add a quick 30 seconds on it. Already Mr. Chenoy alluded to this. Our foreign exchange bill has 3 components. 1/3 of the foreign exchange is import of petroleum products, in which the entire car industry and vehicular industry rests on. 1/3 is fertilizers and 1/3 is the rest of the products. So, but at the same time, he said that the battery industry will require certain types of componentry, which will also require importation. What is the impact of that? That has to be studied at the macro level. The second quick thing is a similar example in the industry which I come from. In 2001, a non-smartphone, which would be as big as this bottle, as you say, if you purchased it, it would cost 35,000 rupees. A phone which just has SMS and voice. That's 2001. Today, the same phone is 500 rupees, new phone. Non-smartphone. Smartphones are 1,500 rupees. So technology has been able to bring down the cost of the hardware. So there's one example. Of course, it's a completely different industry, but the whole ecosystem worked for it and drove that to that type of a kind of pricing and all that. Another quick point is the cost of acquisition of a vehicle, whether it's a bus or this thing. Typically, the bank funding is important for an individual to buy a vehicle or for an individual to buy a car. The cost of funding is very high now. If you want to take a car loan, you all know that. Can, for this electric vehicle, can the funding be come down to, say, 1 or 2% interest type of thing? Is that, of course, that is possible, but that requires regulation, etc. And finally, not only technology, as all of them alluded to, it is the innovation in the business and the commercial model which will actually drive this ecosystem. Thank you.